What's something your family raised you doing that you later learnt was really weird? Story 1. Grew up in a hoarder house. I look back at my childhood now and can't believe the cluttered nightmare I grew up in. Now I relish throwing things away when I'm done with them. Story 2. Not cleaning. My mom didn't know how to clean and so couldn't really teach us either. We had this fungus growing out of the carpet at one house that looked like cooked lasagna noodles. We would just kick it out of the way when it sprouted up, or my mom would buy a new rug and put it on top of the old rug, especially if the old rug was stuck to the floor from filth or something. I didn't think anything of it and would have friends over who probably talked all kinds of shit about me afterwards. But they kept coming over anyways, so I guess they weren't that turned off. Story 3. Catholic mother, Muslim dad, neither really practicing. We celebrated Christmas though, and on Christmas Eve night, instead of doing the normal Christmas stuff like cookies, milk, etc., my dad would loudly pretend to violently chase Santa out of the house by yelling and cussing him out and throwing his shoe at him, which we would later find in places like the fireplace. Story 4. Using a ship's bell to call for dinner. My parents got tired of yelling for us, so they mounted a ship's bell to the hallway wall. They would ring it for dinner and any other occasion when they needed our attention. Like Pavlov's dog, I get hungry whenever I hear a ship's bell ring. Story 5. Before I was totally competent swimming by myself, my mom would put a life jacket on me, tie a long piece of nylon rope to it, and chuck me in the river. She'd basically swim me on a leash down the river for fun. Mom, you are the classiest redneck. Story 6. Having your teen partners just move in. My brothers both had their girlfriends move in with us when they were 14 and 15, due to their home life being rough. When I was 14, my boyfriend of 3 months got kicked out, so he moved in with us, no questions asked, for 2 years. Several of our friends also just moved in with us. Story 7. When I became an adult, I was shocked to find out that other families did things with their kids. My mom was a shopper, my dad golfed and played cards at the club. We never had any family activities like hiking, camping, bowling, or anything in the 60s and 70s. When I had things my parents could have come to watch, they never did. My daughter was a good tennis player, and I spent every afternoon and all weekends with her playing. She did get a full-ride tennis scholarship in Hawaii for college. I don't think I had one real conversation with my dad. When he was dying, I asked him if he could tell me he was proud of me. He said, "I'll think about it. That shit F's you up for life." Story 8. In the summer, my dad used to get us up, myself and 3 siblings, at 9 a.m., give us breakfast, and then boot us out of the house and lock the back front doors from the inside. We weren't allowed back inside until the streetlights came on, unless it was only using the washroom or getting a drink. Our ages were 10, 9, 7, and 4 the first time he did it because he told me, "You're old enough to look after them on your own now, and you're not sitting around the house on your fat asses all day." My stepmom never questioned it because she figured that he was just getting us to play outside for a few hours. Once my second youngest sister, the 7-year-old, got heat stroke and my dad was pissed that he had to drive us all to the hospital and waste time. Realized when I was 14, 15 that he just wanted us out of the house so he could drink and watch NHL. We never really questioned why he was kicking us out because the other kids that lived on the street were also outside around the same time as us. Once we were invited into my brother's friend's house to play his Wii, and we were like, "You're allowed to go inside and play the Wii? UTF?" Edit, for those mentioning the Wii. This was around 2006. Edit 2. For those concerned with how we ate, yes, we did eat during the day. My dad sometimes would put fruit or something out on the back deck table, but usually we'd get food from friends' parents. We'd find cash lying around and save up enough to get candy from the dollar store. There was a farm near the house, and we'd eat the chives that grew naturally on the side of the property / steal crab apples, tiny green apples that are super sour, from their trees. Story 9. Whistling for each other. My mom didn't like yelling up the stairs. Apparently an easier solution for walking up them and addressing whomever she needed was to stand at the bottom and give a couple of sharp whistles. We would approach the top of the stairs, and from the bottom she'd tell us what she needed. Time for dinner? Whistle. I want you to come downstairs? Whistle. When I whistled for my at-the-time husband, he got irritated and said he wasn't a dog. I thought about it and I was like, I guess you're right. I now feel like whistling is disrespectful, and I'd never do it. At the same time, I have no problem that this is how our house went. It was more peaceful than shouting, and less work than walking. Just one of those weird family quirks, I guess. Story 10. If I had friends over, my mom wouldn't allow me to offer them anything to eat, nor anything to drink except bottled water. They also weren't allowed to use the upstairs washroom. They had to use the tiny one in the basement. They also weren't allowed to sit on any of the couches, and half the time, not even on the chairs. Fairly certain my mom was trying to make visits by friends as unwelcoming as possible, so they wouldn't visit and ditch me as a friend. She thought that all that mattered was studying and getting good grades, and she was more than willing to sacrifice my social life happiness to ensure that I got good grades. Story 11. We were not allowed to have a drink with our meals. It could be the driest food ever, or you could be thirsty as all hell. Nope. No water. Finish the meal first. Bathing, showering only on Saturday evenings. I must have smelled so bad back then, especially since my dad smoked in the house. It was to save money on the water bill, but a pack of cigarettes a day was in the budget. Story 12. We only ever ate chili with mashed potatoes and applesauce. I thought everyone did this till like grade 11 when I had dinner at a friend's house. Her mom put out chili and I asked if they had any applesauce. They all looked at me like I was nuts, Lowell. Story 13. Whenever it was one of our birthdays, my father made us keep a pen and pad next to the phone to list everyone who called and when. He'd then keep a blacklist of everyone who didn't call or didn't call in a timely fashion. For example, the closer you were related, the earlier in the day you should call under his rules. I didn't realize this was messed up until I was an adult and had a lot of therapy. Story 14. Not cleaning our bathtubs. In the 18 years I spent living with my parents, I probably cleaned my bathtub 3 times. We just considered it normal for it to be moldy and dirty. At least, that's how I saw it, because my parents just never talked about it. When I was a teenager, my mom started giving me tasks to do around the house. I would sweep and mop the floors, I would clean the surfaces, I would clean the toilets and sinks, but the bathtubs were never mentioned. They were just never in my radar as something I needed to clean, and my parents never said otherwise. It was when I moved out and lived with roommates, and eventually romantic partners, that I realized this wasn't normal. Now I gag when I visit my parents and I have to take a shower in those disgusting bathtubs. Story 15. Upon arriving home in the evenings from somewhere, my parents would have one of us kids wait in the car while the other went inside, got their shotgun, and went through every room in the house and backyard to make sure we were okay to enter. I was unaware that my mom was being followed around by a very dangerous man, and I was checking to make sure he wasn't waiting inside the house. I'm not sure why, but it seemed like a good idea to be safe. I assumed they were looking for bears. Story 16. Not flushing the toilet at night. Our toilet used to be fed by a rainwater reservoir that was stored in a cupboard up high in my parents' room. When you flushed, it used to drip for a while and would disturb them. Can't blame them. I just got used to doing it, and when I moved in with my girlfriend, she was disgusted that things were left until the morning. Can't blame her either. Story 17. I didn't realize how weird it was that when I was in 7th grade, my birthday Christmas gift was porn mags, probably randomly taken from my stepdad's massive collection, like 40+ large garbage bags full. I ended up having some of the strangest sexual relationships out of anyone I know, and I think it was because it was so weirdly normalized in my house. At the time, I was just annoyed because it was basically a non-gift. He had so much porn stored I could have filled my closet, and he wouldn't have noticed it gone missing. I didn't have to seek it out. Story 18. Changing clothes in the living room and terrace. BCS parents say, it's dirty if you are still wearing outside clothes while going in your bedroom. I just noticed this is weird when I was older and friends came by, and they were surprised when my dad casually stripped to his underwear on our terrace. Parents are still doing it, but not when a total stranger is around now. I talked about how it's weird. But they do it when they already know someone close enough. And I had to warn my BF about it before he came around. He's now getting used to it. Story 19. My family drives everywhere and doesn't stop. Sleep-in shifts in the car, share the responsibilities of driving. There are a total of 3 stops in a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. If you gotta go to the bathroom, you wait until the next stop. There are no other stops. And I legitimately mean that. There is no, but what about? No. I was raised that you gotta figure out a way to hold it. 24-hour trips from Minnesota to Texas. 3 stops, maybe 4. 12-hour trip from Minnesota to Indiana. 1 stop. 26 hours to Washington State. 3 stops. Maybe 4. That was my standard growing up, and I was used to it. Getting to college and riding with other people was so eye-opening and honestly very painful because driving a 3-hour trip and having to stop at all was, and still is, absurd to me, and I have friends that would legitimately stop 2 or 3 times for breaks. I've relaxed a bit with marriage and kids of my own, but most of the time I try to cut down on stops as much as possible. Story 20. In high school, my dad had a rule. If you've done it, I've done it. And if you and your friends are going to do it in the house and have them stay the night. Coupled with, if you ever need a ride, you can call me to pick you up. He was talking about drugs and drinking. He wasn't encouraging it, but allowing a safe space. This was one of the better things in my childhood. Story 21, not using a dishwasher. I think they were convinced that it would drastically increase the water consumption, but it takes way less time and water than doing it by hand. I pre-wash/soak my dishes in a small amount of water and throw them in on the short cycle. Wish I had done this years ago. Story 22. I dated a girl back in high school, and she was flabbergasted the fact that we put butter in the fridge. She looks at me and was like, "Why do you guys put butter in the fridge? Sometimes it gets really hard." And my response to that was, "What aisle and section can you find butter at the grocery store?" Asterisk. I even showed her the keep refrigerated sign on the tub asterisk. What does this say? She proceeded to say, "I know you get it in the refrigerated section, but my family has always kept it in a butter dish. So apparently sticking butter in the fridge is weird." Story 23. My F38. Dad's side of the family are avid backcountry paddlers. I'm from an area of northern Canada where we have pristine wilderness, with crystal clear lakes and rivers right out our back door. My family have off-grid cabins that are only accessible over water that we spent a lot of time at as kids, year-round. When I was a kid, like maybe 7, 8, my dad started teaching me about edible plants, how to build a fire, how to tell if water was safe to drink, how to build a shelter, how to tell which direction was north, other wilderness skills. My favorite childhood memories are our beginning of summer canoe trips. As soon as school was out, my dad, siblings, and I would go on a canoe trip with our uncle and cousins. It was usually at least a week long. We would try to plan a route so that we could paddle to one of the family cabins, where we would spend at least another week. We would spend most of the day paddling. Even when we were pretty young, our dads would push us to travel 30-ish kilometers per day, including portages. We would still find time to fish and swim and goof off. It was great fun for all of us. So, boarding school in my teen years was where I learned that me and my family were weird. I joined the outdoor ed club and found it frustrating and very boring due to being the only one with any real wilderness skills or experience. I explained my family's pastimes to my teammates, and I learned that the following were highly unusual according to them. That my dad would waste the family's vacation time on camping. That I actually enjoy spending time off-grid, that I could hike or paddle all day, but I appear to be one of those skinny fat people. That I can cook real food on an open fire, not just backpackers' kitchen meals or MREs. That I had a very good kit of camping gear, including redundancies of many items in case of emergencies, worth a lot of money, but most were gifts and hand-me-downs. That was by far my most valuable and treasured possession. A lot of kids from my school were from families that had oil money, for some from working in the business end of the industry, or it was that their land had oil and they received royalties. Other families were very wealthy farmers or successful business people. Lots of my classmates went overseas for multiple vacations a year. They had import cars, which they received from parents for their 16th birthdays. They wore fancy brand name and designer clothes, which I had never even heard of, so I felt very much like a fish out of water at that school. Even the outdoorsier of my classmates didn't really rough it. A lot of the boys hunted, but on farmland in cell range and spent the night in cabin resorts. So the kind of experiences my family had seemed primitive and unfortunate to my classmates, and they felt sorry for me. Story 24. Ignoring feelings. The way I was brought up, feelings were irrelevant. There were tasks that needed to be performed, and those tasks did not care how you felt. They just had to get done. Oh, you're sad? Bummer. Be sad while performing your tasks. Angry? Had a bad day? Too bad. So sad. Now hop to it. There's shit that needs to get done. I became so good at ignoring suppressing feelings that even somatic sensations became muted. For example, the only way that I know when I am hungry is when I have actual hunger pangs, stomach growling, the whole bit. Anything short of that, and I can't tell whether I feel hungry or not.